This is Canon's new kit lens for the RF mount cameras like the EOS RP or the R, and potentially the new R5 and the R6, the RF 24-105 F4-7.1 IS STM. This is $400 if you just get the lens by itself, but if you get it with the EOS RP, it's $12.99, so you get a $100 discount. And last month, they were on sale for $9.99 for both the camera and the lens, so make sure to check out the latest pricing at the links down below. 24-105 obviously provides a very good range, much more useful than something like the 18-55 on a crop sensor body or something like the 28-70 on Sony cameras, but compared to the EF version, it loses a bit of speed. The EF version was 3.5 to 5.6, and this new RF version is F4-7.1, so a lot of people may be turned off by that, but it actually has a very good reason for it, which is the size and weight. I wouldn't necessarily call this tiny, but it's certainly very small, much smaller and lighter than the 24-105 F4L lens by more than 300 grams. It's shorter by about an inch, and it uses a 67mm filter thread, while the F4 lens uses 77mm. The build quality and design are very similar to the 24-240 that I reviewed about 6 months ago. Definitely more cheap and plasticky than any L lenses, but it's actually not too bad. As long as you don't throw it on the ground or let it sit in the rain, it'll be fine, and you shouldn't be doing that with any lenses anyway. It extends about 2 inches at the long end, and there's no lock for the zoom, but I don't think it will be necessary because it seems pretty well dampened, and it's so light so it's not going to slide out on its own. The throw is quite short, which I like, and the ring feels very smooth throughout the range. On the side, like on the 24-240, there's a switch for the focus and control, so you can use the control ring as either the control ring or the focus ring. There's also the stabilization on and off switch, and I do wish it had an autofocus switch, but you don't get that. You're gonna have to do that in the menu. The lens's aperture goes from f4 at 24mm, f4.5 at 35mm, 5.0 at 50mm, 6.3 at 70mm, and it reaches 7.1 at 85mm. During daytime, that's probably not a big deal, but once the sun goes down or indoors, you're going to be constantly over ISO 3200, even with slower shutter speed. Speaking of slower shutter speed, the lens's stabilization seems to work really well, which will help a lot on the longer end. The stabilization seems just as good, or if not better, than any other L lenses stabilization, so I'm glad that Canon is not using some cheaper version of it on this lens. It also does surprisingly well with flares. It seems to maintain its contrast really well in various lighting situations, and while shooting under bright sun, I didn't see any form of chromatic aberration. At 7.1, you're not going to wow anybody with the background blur, but if you're close enough to the subject, you can produce some decent results. The lens's minimum focusing distance is about 0.2 meters or 0.66 feet at the wide end, and about 0.34 meters or 1.12 feet at the long end. This lens actually has an interesting feature that lets you focus even closer at the wide end if you switch to manual focus at around 5.2 inches for 1:2 magnification. You can take some really cool images with this, which is great, but then if they were going to include a feature like that, I wish the lens had an autofocus switch to access that more easily. I also noticed a little bug which could be very frustrating to some people, because currently this is the only RF mount lens that does not have the autofocus switch. The only way to switch to manual focus is in the menu. But then once you switch to manual focus and start shooting, when you go back in the menu, the focus mode option magically disappears and there's no way to switch back to autofocus. This happened both on my EOS R and the RP, and they are both on their latest firmwares. The only way to solve this is to turn off the camera, detach the lens and put it back on again, turn on the camera, and then it appears in the menu again, which is pretty weird, so I hope Canon fixes that soon. In terms of sharpness, it's actually pretty good throughout the ranges, especially in the center. The corners are not too bad, but not the best. There's a very subtle vignetting at all the range, and when you just step it down a notch, they get a lot better. My first shot at 24mm gave me this horrific result, but then I soon realized that it was my mistake because I placed the camera too close to the target. I moved the camera back slightly and then I got this. The distortion gets a lot worse here on the wide end, but again, it's very sharp in the center. The corner looks really bad here, but this is actually not the lens's fault. This was actually because at this range, the corners are going to be slightly farther away from the lens than the center. So I focused on the corner and took the photo again, and as you can see, it gets a lot better. Not the best, but still pretty good. Overall, I think this is a great lens to start with if you're getting into Canon's full-frame mirrorless system. The image quality is surprisingly good for what it is, and the size and weight are great for travel. The combined weight of this lens and the EOS RP is actually lighter than the 90D with the 18-55 kit lens. And this is cheaper too, and you get longer and wider range, and yes, you lose a bit of light transmission, but this being a full-frame camera, it makes up for it in the low light performance, so I don't think it's a big deal, especially for the price. So I highly recommend this lens if you are interested in purchasing one. Again, check out the latest pricing at the links down below, and leave a comment if you have any more questions about this lens. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.